A grandmother in Birmingham, Alabama, rendered 3 pounds of pork fat on a wood stove every Sunday morning in 1957. She poured the clear liquid into a coffee can and used it for every supper that week. By 1985, a pamphlet at her clinic told her the lard was killing her. She had buried 2 husbands and was still cooking for 9 grandchildren. Number 22 on this list was the method her mother taught her in 1923. Number 14 was so old it had no English name. Number 9 on this list cost nothing because the pot did the work. None of these methods are banned by any law. The food authorities just told her to stop. These 25 cooking methods were so quietly correct that nutritionists spent 40 years proving her right. Hit subscribe and stay with us. Here are the 25 banned soul food cooking methods nutritionists now recommend daily. Number 25, cooking in a black cast iron skillet. A skillet handed down from a great aunt in Tuskegee, scraped clean with salt, never washed with soap. The black grandmother oiled the surface with a rag dipped in bacon grease, set it on the burner, and started supper. You would hear it pop the second the cornbread batter hit the heat. A 2020 review in the Journal of Hematology found that food cooked in cast iron picked up 2 to 5 extra milligrams of iron per serving, with acidic dishes like tomato gravy taking up the most. For black households where store-bought meat was rationed by the paycheck, that skillet quietly fed your bloodstream like a hidden vitamin. The pamphlets in the 1970s warned women to switch to non-stick. The same non-stick coatings were pulled off the market for chemical leaching 40 years later. The skillet outlived the warning. Her cornbread still came out with the crust the color of pecan shell. The science had caught up. Number 24, rendering pork fat at home for cooking lard. A cut of fatback, the butcher in Selma, sold for 9 cents a pound in 1958, set in a heavy pot on a low flame for 2 hours. The grease ran off clear and pale, the cracklings dark and salt bright. She poured the lard into a quart jar and labeled the date in pencil on the lid. That was your supper for the week. By 1977, a Senate report told her to stop using it. By 2010, the Siri Torino meta-analysis followed 347,000 people across 21 studies and reported no clear link between saturated fat and heart disease. Lard sits at roughly 45% mono-unsaturated fat, the same family as olive oil. She hadn't waited for the journal. She'd been frying her chicken in pure pork fat the entire time. Her oil never went rancid in the cabinet. Number 23, slow simmering greens to draw the potlikker. A heavy aluminum pot on a back burner in Greenville, Mississippi, with 3 bunches of collard greens, a smoked ham hock, and 4 cups of water. She let it ride at a low rumble for an hour and a half. She never lifted the lid. The dark green broth at the bottom of the pot was the part she saved. That broth was pot liquor. Vitamins A, C, and K leached out of the leaves into the water like dye out of cloth. The iron from the smoked bone joined them. Your body absorbed it cup by cup. A 2019 review in Nutrients confirmed the liquid held more bioavailable iron and folate than the greens. Her grandmother told her the same thing in 1942. Number 22, stewing meat with bone end cuts for hours. Neck bones, oxtail, smoked turkey wings, ham hocks. Cuts the white grocer in Tuscaloosa would hand over for almost nothing because the cookbooks of the time called them inedible. She set them in a pot with onion, celery, and water and let them go for 3 hours on a back burner. The collagen in the bones broke down into gelatin like wax over heat. The marrow released glycine and proline into the broth, 2 amino acids that build connective tissue and line your gut wall. In 2016, doctors began prescribing bone broth for leaky gut and surgery recovery. They called it a discovery. The cuts the pamphlets told her to skip were now sold in glass jars for $9 at your local market. She'd known the bone was the meal. Number 21, soaking dried beans overnight in cold water. A brown paper sack of dried navy beans bought from the corner store in Mobile for 11 cents a pound in 1956. She rinsed them in a colander, pulled out the stones, and covered them in a stoneware bowl with 3 inches of water before she went to bed. That was the whole step. By morning, the beans had doubled in size, and the soaking water had turned cloudy with phytic acid and oligosaccharides. She poured that water down the sink and started fresh. A 2018 study in the Journal of Food Science showed soaking cut phytic acid by half. That made iron, zinc, and calcium bioavailable. Pressure cookers from the convenience food era told her she could skip the soak. The skip was the part that gave you stomach trouble. She didn't skip. Number 20, saving and reusing bacon grease in a tin. A small metal can with a slotted lid sat on the back of every black grandmother's stove from Birmingham to Buffalo. Each morning's bacon went into the skillet and the runoff went into the can. The grease cooled, turned pale, and waited for the next supper. She greased her cornbread skillet with it, fried her okra in it, dropped a spoonful into a pot of cabbage. You could smell it warming from the next room. The 1980s war on saturated fat told her that tin was a death sentence. By 2014, the Annals of Internal Medicine reviewed 72 studies and found no consistent link between saturated fat and coronary disease. Her bacon grease cost nothing. It was shelf stable for months. The doctors who told her to throw it out had moved on to scolding sugar. Number 19, hand grinding cornmeal with the germ left in. A small cast iron grinder bolted to the kitchen table in a sharecropper's house outside Marion, Alabama in 1949. She poured a cup of dried corn into the hopper and turned the crank, and the meal came out coarse and oily and pale yellow. The corn germ, the small embryo at the center of every kernel, carried the niacin, the magnesium, the vitamin E, and the unsaturated fat that the kernel needed to sprout. Industrial milling stripped the germ out so the meal would not go rancid on the grocery shelf. Her cornbread was made with the whole kernel, and her household did not get pellagra during the years pellagra swept across the South and killed thousands of poor families on a refined corn diet. The county nutritionist who came through in 1953 told her stone-ground cornmeal was old-fashioned. She kept grinding. By 2017, the USDA was publishing pamphlets advising whole grain cornmeal for fiber, magnesium, and B vitamins. They called it heart healthy. The germ she ground into every batch was now in glossy print as the reason. She wasn't impressed. She was 84 and still standing at the grinder twice a week. And the granddaughter she taught the trick to was running her cornmeal through a stand mixer in Atlanta. Her grinder weighed 11 pounds. It was a wedding gift from her mother in 1932. The wood handle had been replaced twice. The iron mechanism hadn't. She kept it oiled with a drop of bacon fat at the joint, and the meal it produced still tasted faintly of the corn the kernel had been. A sack of stone-ground meal at the Natural Grocery in Birmingham in 2018 ran $9 for 2 pounds. Her grinder paid for itself in 18 months. The kernel had carried itself across 4 generations because one grandmother refused to throw away the part the cookbook said to discard. Number 18, smothering cabbage low and slow on the stove. A green head of cabbage shredded thin dropped into a heavy pan with a tablespoon of bacon grease, a half cup of water, and a pinch of black pepper. She put a lid on the pan and walked away for 40 minutes. The cabbage softened, the water cooked off, and the leaves caramelized into a golden brown heap. You could smell the sweetness from the porch. Cabbage is part of the cruciferous family. It carries glucosinolates, sulfur compounds. The modern research links to lower colon cancer rates in your gut. Long, gentle cooking with a small amount of fat made the fat-soluble nutrients absorbable to your body, the way a tea bag releases its color in hot water. The 1990s low-fat advice told her to steam it dry. The steam version passed through your body without releasing much of anything. Her smothered version filled a plate for 9 cents. A black grandmother in 1957 wasn't following a diet. She was running a household on a paycheck that ran short by Wednesday. The pantry held what the white grocer would sell at the back door. What most people miss about your grandmother's cooking is that the methods were never chosen because a doctor had recommended them. They were chosen because they stretched the food. 40 years later, the doctors caught up. They published the studies. They ran the trials. They called the old methods heart healthy and gut healthy and anti-inflammatory. Your grandmother had been cooking that way since 1923. The science wasn't new. It was just finally written down. Number 17, making sweet potatoes by hand with the skin on. A bushel of sweet potatoes pulled from the garden behind a shotgun house in Holly Springs, Mississippi, scrubbed under a cold tap. She didn't peel them. She baked them whole in a low oven for 90 minutes until the skins blistered and the orange flesh ran with sugar like honey. She ate the skins along with the meat. Your grandmother knew the same. The skin of a sweet potato carries a heavy share of the fiber, the potassium, and the chlorogenic acid the modern research links to lower blood pressure. The 1960s home economics pamphlets told her to peel everything. The peel went in the compost. By 2020, dietitians at Tufts were urging Americans to eat sweet potato skins for the polyphenols. She had not stopped. Her grandchildren walked into the kitchen on a Saturday afternoon, and you could smell caramelizing yam and salt all the way to the porch. Number 16, simmering smoked turkey necks in place of fatback. A package of smoked turkey necks bought from the meat counter in Atlanta, 3 pounds for under $2 in 1981. She had begun swapping out the salt pork her own mother used. Smoked turkey carried the same depth of flavor with a third of the saturated fat and half the sodium. She seasoned the greens with one neck instead of a hock, simmered for 2 hours, and the broth came out richer and lighter at once. Her doctor had not asked her to change. She had read a pamphlet at the senior center and decided on the swap on her own. The American Heart Association in 2018 published a recipe modification guide that recommended exactly this swap as a strategy for elder Black households at higher risk for hypertension. She had been doing it for 37 years before they wrote it down. Number 15, fermenting cabbage and peppers into chow chow. Late September in Edgefield, South Carolina, the last of the green tomatoes pulled from the garden, shredded with cabbage and onion and hot peppers, salted heavy and pressed into a stoneware crock with a wooden weight on top. She covered the crock with a clean cloth and set it on the back porch for 9 days. The crock smelled like a thunderstorm. Wild lactic acid bacteria fermented the vegetables into a tangy, crunchy relish she would eat all winter, served alongside black-eyed peas and rice. Lactic acid fermented vegetables carry living probiotics. Lactobacillus strains the modern microbiome research links to better gut barrier function and lower inflammation in your body. She did not call it probiotic, she called it chow chow. By 2019, the National Institutes of Health was funding studies on fermented vegetables and gut health. Her crock was older than the grant by half a century. Number 14, slow cooking gumbo with okra as the thickener. A cast iron pot in a Creole kitchen in St. Bernard Parish, Louisiana, with a dark roux on the bottom, a quart of stock from the bones of 2 stewing hens, and a heap of fresh okra cut into rounds. The okra hit the hot stock and released its mucilage, the thick fluid that thickened the broth without flour. The mucilage in okra is soluble fiber, polysaccharides made of galactose and rhamnose. Soluble fiber slows glucose absorption, binds to bile acids, and lowers LDL cholesterol over time. The 1970s told her okra was country food and beneath the modern table. By 2021, dietitians were prescribing okra to diabetic patients for blood sugar control. Her gumbo had been doing the same job at every Sunday supper since 1944, when her aunt walked her through the roux. She still made it the same way. The roux took 45 minutes. You couldn't rush it. She wouldn't let her granddaughter touch the spoon until the girl could tell the color by the smell. When the okra hit the pot, the kitchen smelled green and bright. The broth went from thin to silk. In 3 minutes, she served it over rice cooked in chicken broth. The bowl in your hand was a full supper. 2 of her grandsons were in their 50s and on no diabetes medication. The youngest ran a restaurant in New Orleans and put the pot on the menu under his great aunt's name. She lived to see it. A list like this can read like a celebration. It isn't. These methods were carried by women paid a fraction of what their neighbors earned. They stood at a stove every night because no one else would. The part few people talk about is that the cooking wasn't a hobby. It was a math problem run twice a day. The methods worked because they had to. The fact that nutritionists are now recommending them isn't a vindication. It's the history catching up. Number 13, simmering pinto beans low and slow with smoked meat. A pound of pintos in a cast iron pot, a smoked ham bone, a half onion, 6 cups of water, 3 hours on a low flame. The beans softened, the bone gave up its marrow, and the liquid thickened into a starch-rich pot liquor the color of caramel. Slow-cooked beans hold their resistant starch, a form of carbohydrate your small intestine cannot break down. Resistant starch travels to the colon, feeds your gut bacteria, and produces butyrate, a short-chain fatty acid that lowers colonic inflammation. By 2020, the gastroenterology journals were calling resistant starch a frontline strategy for irritable bowel and colon cancer prevention. Her pot of beans cost 40 cents a serving in 1962 and 40 cents a serving in 2002. The science had moved. The beans had not. Number 12, baking cornbread in a cast iron skillet preheated with grease. A skillet pulled from a 400-degree oven, a tablespoon of bacon grease swirled in until it sizzled, a batter of stone-ground cornmeal, buttermilk, an egg, and salt poured in. The batter hit the hot grease, and the bottom locked into a dark, crisp shell in 8 seconds. You could hear it from across the kitchen. She slid the skillet back in the oven for 20 minutes and pulled out a loaf with a crust like a coin and an interior the texture of soft sand. No sugar, no flour. Modern cornbread mixes carry up to 14 grams of sugar per slice. Her version carries 0. It fed 8 people, and you could keep it for 3 days on the counter. The 1980s told her unsweetened cornbread was austere. The black grandmother in Mississippi did not need sugar to make corn taste like corn. She needed buttermilk, hot grease, and a working oven. Her cornbread was already in her granddaughter's hand. Number 11, stewing okra with tomato over a low fire. A skillet of cubed okra and chopped Roma tomatoes from the garden, a slice of bacon for fat, 25 minutes covered. The okra softened. The tomato broke down into a rough sauce. The two together gave a side dish that carried lycopene from the tomato, mucilage from the okra, and the flavor of the small piece of bacon distributed across the whole pan. Lycopene becomes more bioavailable when heated with a small amount of fat, like color emerging in a warm dye bath. The black grandmother in Decatur, Georgia, had been pairing them since the 1940s. She did not know the word lycopene. She knew the bacon made the tomato taste like itself doubled on your tongue. By 2019, the cancer prevention guidelines had begun listing tomato and fat dishes as a heart protective combination. Her side dish ran her 30 cents in 1955. Number 10, washing greens with vinegar before cooking. A heavy galvanized basin in the backyard of a house in Macon, Georgia, 3 bunches of mustard greens floating in cold water with a half cup of cider vinegar stirred in. She let them sit for 10 minutes, lifted them out, and rinsed twice. The vinegar wash pulled grit and dust off the leaves like a sieve. A 2014 study in the Journal of Food Protection found a vinegar soak cut microbial load on your leafy greens by up to 90%. The county extension agent in 1968 had told her to wash greens under the tap. The tap missed the silt the field hands had brought in on their boots. The vinegar caught it. She had buried no one to a foodborne illness, and her greens went from rough field bunch to clean kitchen, ready in 12 minutes flat. Number 9, stretching one chicken across 2 suppers with the bones to soup. A whole stewing hen bought live from a neighbor in Greene County, Alabama in 1948, dressed at home for under 50 cents. She roasted the bird Sunday for dinner, pulled the leftover meat off the carcass Monday morning, and dropped the bones, the wing tips, and the neck into a stock pot with 3 cups of water and a chopped onion. By Tuesday, she would have a quart of dark, gelatin-rich broth she would use as the base for vegetable soup, rice, or a pot of beans. 2 suppers, 1 bird, almost no waste. By 2015, the Gut Health Press was selling bone broth in glass jars at $12 a quart. Her quart had cost the time it took to remember to put the pot on the stove. She remembered every Sunday for 51 years. The cookbooks her granddaughter brought home in 1991 told her she was doing it wrong. The cookbooks were written by people who never balanced a household on a sharecropper's check. The methods on this list weren't naive. They were the result of 2 centuries of forced ingenuity, passed kitchen to kitchen. The dietitians who came around in the 1960s were trying to help. They were also working from a science base that has now been substantially revised. The grandmother who kept cooking the way her mother had cooked wasn't stubborn. She was the keeper of a longer record. Number 8, cooking with chicken fat saved from a roast. A roasted hen on the carving board in 1953, the drippings poured into a glass jar and chilled in the icebox until the fat rose and solidified into a pale yellow cap. She lifted the cap off and called it schmaltz, though the word in her kitchen was just chicken grease. She used a teaspoon of it in the next pot of greens, a tablespoon to start a roux, a smear under the cornbread. Chicken fat is roughly 47% monounsaturated with a smoke point near 375 degrees. A 2017 review in the journal Nutritionists described chicken fat as nutritionally similar to olive oil for cooking purposes. The 1980s told her to throw the drippings away. Her mother in 1923 would have called that wasteful. She was her mother's daughter. Number 7, drying string beans on a porch for winter. A long needle threaded with cotton string, a basket of fresh green beans pulled from a backyard plot in Macomb, Mississippi. Each bean run through with the needle and hung in a row from a porch rafter like clothes on a line. The beans dried in the August sun for 9 days, shriveled into leathery brown pods, and went into a paper sack in the pantry. In January, she boiled a handful in a pot of water with a piece of smoked bone and pulled out reconstituted green beans that tasted concentrated, sweet, and faintly smoky. She called them leather britches. The drying process preserved the fiber and most of the minerals while keeping the food shelf-stable for 9 months without refrigeration. The 1960s told her to buy frozen. Frozen beans broke her grocery budget. Her porch did not. Number 6, slow baking sweet potato pie with the natural sugar. A pie shell rolled out on a floured board in 1956, filled with mashed roasted sweet potato, a beaten egg, a cup of evaporated milk, a teaspoon of cinnamon, a half cup of sugar at most. Modern grocery store sweet potato pies carry up to 40 grams of sugar per slice. Her version held the sugar back because the sweet potato was already sweet enough on its own. She baked it slow at 325 degrees for 50 minutes until the filling set into a custard the color of saddle leather. Roasting concentrated the natural sugars in the potato the way a fire concentrates a stew. The result was sweeter than a yam picked straight out of the dirt and lower in added sugar than anything in the grocery freezer aisle. Her great-grandchildren still ask for it at Thanksgiving. Number 5, soaking and pressure cooking dried black-eyed peas. A pound of black-eyed peas soaked in a stoneware bowl overnight in a kitchen in Beaufort, South Carolina. The soak water drained, the peas rinsed, then dropped into a pressure cooker with a smoked turkey wing and 4 cups of water for 25 minutes. That was the whole method. The peas softened into a tender, pale green bowl with a thick gravy. Black-eyed peas hold the same nutritional profile they carried out of West Africa with the women who brought them: protein, fiber, folate, magnesium, iron. The 1970s told her canned beans were modern. Canned beans had 3 times the sodium of her version and lost most of the folate to the heat process. She kept the dry bag in the pantry. By 2019, registered dietitians at Harvard were running studies on legume intake and longevity. She had been the study. Number 4, smothering chicken in a heavy pan with the lid on. A cut-up fryer in a deep skillet over medium heat, dredged in seasoned flour, browned on both sides, then covered with a thin gravy made from the pan drippings, water, and a chopped onion. She turned the heat to low, slammed the lid down, and walked away for 35 minutes. The chicken cooked in its own steam, the gravy thickened, and the skin softened into a tender cap that held the meat together like a soft seal. Slow, low heat cooking under a lid kept the protein moist and avoided the high temperature crusts that produce heterocyclic amines, the carcinogens linked to high heat grilling and frying. The 1990s told her grilled chicken was healthier. The grilled version produced compounds the 2010 dietary research called probable carcinogens. Her smothered version did not. She did not change. Number 3, brewing sun tea instead of buying soda. A glass gallon jar set in the backyard of a house in Tuskegee on a July afternoon, 3 black tea bags floating on top, a cup of water, the sun doing the rest of the work over 4 hours. By supper time, she would have a gallon of black tea the color of light molasses, brewed without electricity and sweetened with a 1/4 cup of sugar at most when she sweetened it at all. A glass of her sun tea carried 15 calories. A glass of grocery store sweet tea carried 140. Her household drank sun tea every summer of every year from 1944 through 2003, and her 3 children grew up without a cavity until their 20s. The 1970s called sun tea unsanitary. By 2014, the Centers for Disease Control had quietly walked the warning back. she had buried no one to bacterial tea. Number 2, baking sweet potatoes in the coals of a wood stove. A wood stove in a tenant farmer's kitchen outside Greenwood, Mississippi in 1942, the fire dying down after supper, 6 small sweet potatoes pushed into the gray ash with a long iron poker. She left them overnight. By morning, the skins were blackened and papery, and the flesh inside was the color of marigold and the texture of warm pudding. Slow, low-heat ash baking preserved the beta-carotene, the vitamin C, and the potassium. High-heat conventional baking partly destroyed. She peeled the blackened skin with her thumb and ate the potato with a sprinkle of salt for breakfast. The convenience food era told her this was peasant food. The 2018 nutrition science called the same method the gentlest way to preserve a sweet potato's full nutrient load. She had been the gentlest cook in 3 counties. Number 1, gathering family at one table for a long supper. The single most important method on this list, the one no nutritionist in 1965 would have called a cooking method, the one every modern study now confirms is the strongest predictor of long-term health for elder Black households. A Black grandmother in Birmingham set the table at 6 in the evening, called every grandchild within walking distance, and held the meal until everyone was seated. The supper itself was simple. The act of sitting together for 45 minutes was not. Slow, attentive eating with family lowered cortisol, improved digestion, regulated your blood sugar, and built the social bonds. The modern loneliness research now links directly to longevity. The 1980s told her family supper was a luxury. The 2022 Harvard study on elder loneliness called it medicine. She had been making medicine 3 times a day for 60 years, and she had not needed a journal article to know it was working. Number 23, hog jowl with greens. The cured cheek of the pig went into a heavy iron pot at first light, covered with water, and did not come off the stove until afternoon. A cook in rural Virginia layered collard leaves on top, stem side down, and watched the fat slowly melt through the green. The pot smoked low for hours. The kitchen smelled of pork and earth and wood smoke. Edna Lewis, born in Freetown, Virginia in 1916, wrote about this dish in 1976 the way other people write about prayer. She kept cooking it until she passed in 2006. Her recipe outlived the entire low-fat decade. Doctors warned against jowl meat through every one of those years. What the warnings missed is that the fat was not contaminating the leaf. The fat was the reason your body could pull the iron out of the leaf at all. Your great-grandmother in 1958 knew this without a single chart. She just watched her grandchildren grow. Black mothers in the 1960s cooked by the look of the batter, the weight of flour in a cupped palm, the color of the roux as it darkened. A pinch meant something specific to her fingers. A splash of vanilla was always the same splash. She knew biscuit dough was right by how it pulled from her hands, and she knew rice had enough water by pressing her fingertip to the surface. This was mastery passed from mother to daughter through thousands of repetitions, a cooking language built on touch rather than numbers. The knowledge came from West African kitchens where written recipes never existed, carried through plantation houses where enslaved women fed dozens without a single instruction card. You learned by standing next to her, watching her hands, and when she died, no cookbook could teach you what she knew. Number 21, vinegar pepper sauce. Every kitchen table in the Black South had a bottle of vinegar with hot peppers floating inside. It was not a condiment, it was a preservation system disguised as a table sauce. The peppers released capsaicin into the vinegar over time, creating a solution with both antimicrobial and antioxidant properties. You shook it over greens, beans, rice, or anything that needed brightening. When the vinegar ran low, you poured more in. The same peppers lasted for months, sometimes years. Some families passed the same bottle down through an entire growing season, refilling it the way you top off a gas tank. Food safety officials warned against storing peppers in vinegar at room temperature because the pH might not be low enough to prevent botulism. But vinegar sits at a pH between 2.4 and 3.4, well below the 4.6 threshold where Clostridium botulinum can grow. The science was on your grandmother's side the entire time. She just never got the credit. Number 21, bacon grease biscuits. A small tin sat on the back shelf above every southern stove, half full of cold saved bacon fat from breakfast. A cook in Mobile would scoop a teaspoon out with a butter knife, cut it into self-rising flour with a fork, and roll the dough out on the counter dusted with cornmeal. The biscuits went into a hot oven at 425 and came out 15 minutes later with tops cracked open. The fat carried vitamin A and vitamin D and vitamin K straight into a bite of bread. The 1990s fat-free era pushed margarine onto every supermarket shelf instead. By 2015, the FDA pulled those same hydrogenated oils off the shelves because the trans fats were killing people. The bacon grease tin, meanwhile, sat undisturbed on the same shelf for 40 years. Her biscuits kept rising. The food authorities, who told her to throw the tin out, had to come back and admit the replacement was worse than the thing they replaced. Every black kitchen in the 1960s had a jar near the stove, murky and golden, filled with rendered bacon fat that never got thrown away. Your mother poured fresh drippings through a strainer and let them settle like she was making a deposit at the bank. That grease seasoned everything. Cornbread got a spoonful before the batter hit the skillet. Green beans simmered in it for hours. Eggs fried in it came out with edges so crisp they shattered at the touch of a fork. During the Second World War, the government collected bacon grease from households because the glycerin could be extracted for explosives, and black families who had been saving drippings for generations just shook their heads. A single jar replaced butter, oil, and half the seasonings in the cabinet, turning the cheapest ingredients into meals that tasted rich. Today, chefs charge extra for dishes finished in animal fat. Your mother never charged a cent. She never owned a measuring cup, not because she could not afford one, but because she did not need one. Number 24, Potlikker preservation. When your grandmother boiled collard greens with a ham hock for 3 hours, the liquid left behind was not waste. It was medicine in a mason jar. She saved that greenish broth, rich as liquid gold, poured it into jars, and kept it on the back porch in winter or the root cellar in summer. Families drank it straight or sopped it with cornbread. Extension agents told black families to throw the cooking water away because boiling destroyed the vitamins. They were half right and completely wrong. Researchers in Spain found that boiling extracted 50% of total flavonoids and 60% of vitamin C into the cooking liquid. The vitamins were not destroyed. They migrated into the Potlikker like passengers changing trains. The women who saved that broth were capturing every nutrient the greens had to give. They did not need a study to know it kept their children strong through winter. Number 25, lard fried chicken. A cast iron skillet on a wood stove in Greenville, Mississippi, holding 3 inches of pork fat the grandmother had rendered herself from a shoulder trim that morning. She strained it through cheesecloth into a tin she kept behind the stove, the same tin her own mother had used. The thighs went in skin down, sizzling so loud she could not hear the radio. She fried them slow, never rushed, until the skin shattered like glass when you bit into it. The kitchen smelled like sizzle, and smoke and Sunday afternoon. On Sundays after church, the family ate it standing in the kitchen because there were not enough chairs and nobody minded. Then, in 1977, a Senate report told her to stop. Lard was the new enemy. Switch to soybean oil, cottonseed oil, anything but the fat that had fed her people through 2 world wars. She didn't switch. By the time researchers in 2010 admitted lard had no real link to heart disease, she had been gone 12 years. Her recipe was already in her granddaughter's hand. A single ham hock could season a pot of beans large enough to feed 8 people for 2 days, and your mother never apologized for there being no sliced ham on the plate. In Black households during the 1960s, meat was a flavor agent, not a centerpiece. A few strips of fatback gave an entire pot of greens their richness. A neck bone lent body to soup that was mostly vegetables and broth. The old folk song Ham Bone referenced this directly, singing about a bone traveling from kitchen to kitchen because even bare bone still carried flavor. This was economics turned into art. When beef cost more than a family could spend on a Tuesday, the answer was not to skip meat, but to use a small amount so skillfully that every spoonful tasted full. The technique came from West African one-pot traditions, where dried fish or smoked meat flavored large communal stews. Nobody at the table felt poor. That was the whole point. Number 23, lard sealing. After rendering hog fat over a low fire until it turned white and clean, your grandmother poured that liquid lard over cooked meats in a crock until the fat covered every surface by at least an inch. When the lard cooled and solidified, it created an airtight seal like a wax lid that no bacteria could penetrate. The meat stayed preserved for months in a root cellar without any refrigeration at all. Families in the Delta kept crocks of lard-sealed pork in their cellars all winter. Health officials in the 1950s called this method dangerous and unsanitary. Modern food science tells a different story. Rendered lard, stored in a cool environment, creates an anaerobic barrier that prevents oxidation and microbial growth. French chefs call this technique confit and charge you $40 a plate. Black women in Mississippi called it putting up meat and charged nothing. Today's gourmet is yesterday's survival. Number 19, turnip greens with stems. The pot took the whole plant, the leafy tops, the bitter stems, the small white roots, all of it together in a heavy iron pot with smoked meat and a splash of cider vinegar at the end. A cook in Tuskegee in 1955 stood over that pot for hours, lifting the lid every so often, adjusting the heat with the air vent on the wood stove. She didn't have a peer-reviewed paper to wave around. She had a heavy pot, a smoked turkey wing, and 40 years of doing it the way her mother did it. The 1985 dietary climate told families to skip greens cooked in fat and reach for raw salads instead. What that advice missed is that the fat is what unlocks the carotenoids in the leaf. The pot in Tuskegee already knew. It had been doing the work for centuries, and it kept working the day the chart was published, and it kept working the day the chart was retired. The cheapest cuts arrived, tough and stubborn, but your mother knew how to break them. She filled a bowl with white vinegar mixed with water, sometimes adding crushed garlic or black pepper, and submerged the meat overnight. By morning, the acid had softened connective tissue and broken down fibers that made cheap beef chewy. Wesley Jones, a formerly enslaved man from South Carolina, described a vinegar and pepper sauce used by enslaved people to tenderize smoked meats, a practice documented in Works Progress Administration interviews during the 1930s. That technique traveled through generations, landing in 1960s kitchens where a bottle of vinegar sat next to the stove as permanently as the salt. The hack turned cuts, costing pennies per pound, into meals that fell apart at the touch. Butchers sold the toughest parts cheap because they assumed nobody wanted them. Black mothers bought them on purpose, knowing vinegar and thyme could transform what others threw away. Number 25, salt box pork curing. Before refrigeration reached black homes in the rural South, salt was the only thing standing between your family and hunger. A hog was slaughtered in November when the air turned cold. Every cut was rubbed thick with coarse salt and stacked in a wooden box, layer after layer, like bricks in a wall, with salt packed between each piece. The meat sat for weeks, drawing moisture out through osmosis until bacteria could not survive on its surface. That box was the family's bank account in meat. The USDA later said this method was unreliable because home cooks could not measure salinity precisely enough. But food scientists at Texas A&M have confirmed that salt concentrations above 6% create conditions where salmonella and E. coli cannot reproduce. Your great-grandmother did not own a salinity meter. She used her hands and her mother's memory. The pork lasted through March. That was enough. Number 20, Potlikker from collards. A heavy iron pot full of dark green leaves, a smoked turkey wing at the bottom, water to cover, simmered 3 hours until the leaves had given up everything they had. The broth at the bottom of that pot was nearly black, slick with fat and soft with iron. A cook in Charleston ladled it into a coffee mug and drank it standing at the stove. Children sopped it up with cornbread. Nobody threw a single drop away. Most of the soluble vitamins and minerals from the greens leach into that liquid, more vitamin K in 1 cup than your daily multivitamin used to deliver. White nutritionists in the 1970s called it pot juice and threw it down the drain. Black households strained it and saved it. They were right. They were right about the leaves, right about the broth, and right about every warning that told them to stop. The same cup she drank from a mason jar in 1962 now sells in Brooklyn juice bars for $9. Nobody threw away the water left after greens finished cooking. That dark, fragrant liquid, thick with vitamins from hours of slow simmering, was called Potlikker, and black mothers treated it like medicine. Jackie Torrance, the African-American storyteller, remembered her grandmother making Potlikker from mustard greens, pinto beans, and white potatoes, drinking it warm from a cup. The tradition reached back to West Africa, where dipping starchy foods into the liquid from boiled greens was standard practice, and it survived the Middle Passage and plantation kitchens without losing a generation. Families sopped it up with cornbread, fed it to sick children, and used it as a folk remedy for stomach trouble. Nutritionally, Potlikker contained concentrated vitamins A, C, and K, along with calcium and iron released during cooking. What the rest of the country poured down the drain, black mothers saved and served the next morning. It cost nothing. It healed everything. These methods were not a diet. They were a household run on a paycheck, a stove, and the memory of a mother who had figured it out the generation before. Now, I am not a doctor, and this is not medical advice. The grandmother in Birmingham did not stop using lard when the pamphlet told her to. She kept cooking, and the science walked back, its warnings one by one. If your grandmother is still standing at her stove, ask her how she cooks. If she is gone, ask the women who learned from her. Tell us in the comments which method your grandmother kept doing after she was told to stop. We will read every one. This is The Hungry Historian.